The glass vase shattered against my skull before I even saw it coming. One moment I was standing in my own dining room, surrounded by John's family, calmly refusing to sign away my house. The next moment, blood was streaming down my face, warm and sticky, pooling on the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself 3 years ago. "How dare you go against my sister, you ungrateful bitch!" John screamed, his face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. His hands were still raised, trembling. Pieces of glass glittered in his palms. The room erupted. Someone shrieked, chairs scraped, voices overlapped in chaos. But I felt nothing except a strange, cold calm washing over me like ice water. I looked up at my jobless husband, the man I'd supported for 2 years, the man whose sister had bled me dry of $50,000. I looked at Laura standing behind him, her mouth open in shock. And I said quietly, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade, "You have no idea what I can do." The room went silent. Even Laura went pale. But to understand how I got here, bleeding on my own floor, yet somehow more powerful than I'd ever been, I need to take you back 3 years. I spent my 20s like a woman possessed. While friends went to brunch and posted vacation photos, I worked the morning shift at the hospital cafeteria and the evening shift doing data entry for an insurance company. Sleep came in fragments. My wardrobe consisted of 3 pairs of work pants and 5 shirts I rotated through the week. I learned to make a pot of rice last 4 days, to drink water when hunger gnawed at my stomach between shifts, to walk past store windows without looking. People called it extreme. My cousin laughed when I turned down her wedding because I couldn't afford the gift and travel. "You're young, Susan. Live a little." But they didn't understand. They had safety nets, parents who could help with rent, partners who split bills, the luxury of mistakes that wouldn't destroy them. I had nothing except the promise I made to myself at 19, standing in my aunt's little cramped living room where I'd been sleeping on the couch for 8 months. I would never be at anyone's mercy again. Every paycheck got divided the same way. 40% to rent for the small room I rented in Mrs. Chen's house, 30% to my apartment fund, deposited the same day I got paid, before I could be tempted, 20% for food and transportation, 10% for everything else, which meant nothing else most months. I tracked every dollar in a notebook I kept in my purse. I knew exactly how much I needed. Down payment, closing costs, 6 months of mortgage payments for security. The number lived in my head like a prayer. By 25, I almost had enough. By 26, I started looking at listings, my heart hammering each time I clicked through photos of spaces that could be mine. The real estate agent seemed puzzled by me. She said, "You're pre-approved for more. You could look at nicer neighborhoods." But I knew what I wanted. Not nice, secure. A solid building and a decent area with good locks and reasonable maintenance fees. Something I could actually afford without stretching myself dangerously thin. I found it on a Tuesday morning before my hospital shift. A 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had stood for 30 years. The kitchen was outdated, the bathroom tiles were beige, and the carpet had seen better days. But the windows let in clean light. The building was well maintained, and when I stood in the empty living room, I felt something I'd never felt before. Possibility. The day I signed the papers, my hand shook so badly I could barely write my name. The lawyer had to pause, asking if I was all right. I nodded, not trusting my voice. When he handed me the keys, my keys, I locked myself in the apartment and cried for an hour, sitting on the bare floor with my back against the wall that was mine. In the space that was mine, in the life I'd built with my own hands. I furnished it the way I'd saved for it, slowly, deliberately, one piece at a time. The bed came first, purchased on sale and assembled with hands that had forgotten how to rest. Then a small table I found at a thrift store, the wood scarred but sturdy. I sanded it smooth over a weekend, staining it dark brown. 4 months later, a couch, nothing fancy, but comfortable and mine. I bought curtains that actually fit the windows. I hung shelves and filled them with books I'd been collecting from library sales for years. Each addition felt like a victory. The lamp I saved 3 months for. The coffee maker I bought after a year of drinking instant. The mirror in the hallway that made the space feel larger. I would come home from my shifts, drop my bag by the door, and just stand there, looking at what I'd created. Some women dreamed of mansions. I dreamed of this. A door that locked from the inside. Bills I could pay. A place no one could take from me. Mrs. Chen came to visit once, bringing dumplings she had made. She walked through slowly, touching the curtains, admiring the small herb garden I'd started on the windowsill. She said, "You did good, Susan. You did really good." I was 27 years old. I owned my apartment outright. I had 3 months of expenses saved. I was still working both jobs, but now it was to build more security, not survive. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. I should have known peace that complete never lasts.
I met John at a neighborhood cleanup event I'd volunteered for on a rare Saturday off. I almost didn't go. My body screamed for rest. But Mrs. Chen had convinced me that all work makes Susan a tired girl, and I figured picking up trash for 3 hours wouldn't kill me. He was wearing a faded blue t-shirt and jeans, laughing with a group of volunteers near the recycling bins. When our coordinator assigned us to the same section of the park, he introduced himself with an easy smile that reached his eyes. "John," he said, extending his hand. "Looks like we're trash partners for the day." Most men I'd encountered fell into 2 categories: those who saw my work ethic as threatening, or those who saw it as an opportunity to exploit. John seemed different. While we worked, he asked questions that felt genuine. What brought me to the neighborhood? How long had I been here? When I mentioned working 2 jobs, he didn't laugh or call me crazy. He nodded thoughtfully and said, "That takes serious discipline. Most people can't do that." Something in my chest loosened. We grabbed coffee after the cleanup, sitting at a corner cafe while the afternoon light slanted through the windows. He told me he'd been between positions for a few months. His previous company had downsized, but he had several promising leads. "The market's tough right now," he said, stirring his coffee, "but I've got skills. Something will come through." He seemed confident without being arrogant, the kind of person who took setbacks in stride. I told him about the apartment and his face lit up. "You bought a place on your own? That's incredible. Most people our age can't even imagine that." He didn't ask how much it cost or whether I needed help with anything. He just seemed impressed by the accomplishment itself, which felt refreshing. We started seeing each other regularly. John would meet me after my evening shift with takeout, insisting I needed to eat properly after long days. He'd wait in the hospital cafeteria during my breaks, content to just sit and talk. When I mentioned wanting to take a certification course but worrying about the cost, he encouraged me without hesitation. "You've already proven you can do hard things, Susan. Don't hold yourself back now." For the first time in years, I felt seen as a whole person rather than just a pair of working hands. John remembered small things I mentioned, my favorite tea, the author I'd been wanting to read, the fact that I hated cilantro. He brought me flowers once, cheap ones from the bodega, and the gesture made me cry because no one had ever brought me flowers before. His job search continued through our first months together. He'd show me listings he'd applied for, discuss interviews he had scheduled. Some fell through, others never called back. "It's frustrating," he admitted one evening, sitting on my thrift store couch. "I know I'm qualified, but everyone wants someone with connections or someone willing to work for nothing." I understood that. I'd been there. I'd lived that uncertainty. When he stayed over occasionally, he was respectful of my space. He didn't rearrange things or act entitled to my home. He'd help with dishes, offer to grab groceries, treat my apartment with the same care I did. "You've built something real here," he said once, looking around the living room I'd assembled piece by piece. I admire that. 6 months in, I met some of his family at a casual barbecue. His sister Laura was there, polished and talkative, working in pharmaceutical sales. She dominated conversations, but John seemed proud of her success. "Laura's always been the ambitious one," he said. She smiled at me, pleasantly enough, asked polite questions about my work, though her eyes glazed over when I answered. By month 8, John had landed a part-time position at a logistics company. Not ideal, but it's something while I keep looking for full-time, he said. I celebrated with him, relieved to see the worry lines ease from his face. He took me to dinner, nothing expensive, a small Italian place with red checkered tablecloths, and thanked me for being patient during his rough patch. When he proposed 4 months later, kneeling in my small living room with a modest ring he'd saved for, I said yes without hesitation. He'd been kind when I expected harshness, supportive when I expected judgment, present when I expected absence. After years of fighting alone, the idea of partnership felt like coming home. I should have paid more attention to how often Laura called him, how quickly he answered, how his voice changed when he talked to her. So soft, so compliant, like a boy seeking approval. But I was tired of being suspicious. I wanted to believe in something good. We planned the wedding for a Saturday afternoon in late September, when the air had just started to cool and the light turned golden early. Nothing elaborate, 20 people at the community center where we'd met, followed by dinner at a restaurant with a private room. I bought a simple white dress off the rack, altered the hem myself during late nights after my shifts. John wore a suit his brother loaned him. We couldn't afford a honeymoon, but John promised we'd take a trip once he secured full-time work. I felt lighter than I had in years while addressing invitations. Mrs. Chen cried when I asked her to attend. My supervisor from the hospital seemed surprised I was inviting her, but touched nonetheless. I kept the guest list small, deliberately. People who'd actually been present in my life, not obligatory invitations to distant relatives I barely knew. Laura helped with some arrangements, which I appreciated at first. She knew a florist who gave us a discount, recommended the restaurant, offered to coordinate the dinner seating. "You're working so much, Susan," she said during one planning session. "Let me handle the details. You just focus on showing up and looking beautiful." Her efficiency impressed me. John beamed watching his sister and future wife collaborate. 3 days before the wedding, John stayed over after we'd finished packing wedding favors. We sat on my couch, our couch soon, I reminded myself, surrounded by small tool bags filled with chocolates. He'd been quieter than usual all evening, distracted. "There's something I wanted to discuss," he said finally, setting down the ribbon he'd been holding. I looked up from the favor I was tying. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've just been thinking about what marriage means. Partnership, right? Sharing everything." "Of course," I said, though something in his tone made my shoulders tense. "I was thinking it might be good to add my name to the apartment deed." He said it casually, like suggesting we buy different coffee, as a symbol of our commitment, of trust, and real partnership. My hands stopped moving. The chocolate-filled bag sat in my lap, ribbon half tied. The apartment deed sat in my fireproof safe, the paper I'd stared at hours after closing, reading my name over and over, like a prayer finally answered. Susan Marie Walker, sole owner. I set down the favor carefully, buying myself time. The apartment deed sat in my fireproof safe, the paper I'd stared at hours after closing, reading my name over and over, like a prayer finally answered. Susan Marie Walker, sole owner. I set down the favor carefully, buying myself time. "That's something to think about," I said, slowly. "What's there to think about?" His smile had tightened slightly. "We're getting married in 3 days." "I know, but it's a big decision, legal paperwork. Maybe we should wait after the wedding when things settle down and discuss it properly." "Discuss what?" His voice had left his lightness. The lightness had left his voice entirely. "We're about to be your husband. We're supposed to be partners. But you want to keep the apartment in just your name? Like I'm some stranger who might disappear." Guilt crawled up my throat. Was I being unfair? Paranoid? We were getting married. People shared assets in marriages. That's what partnership meant. But the apartment was different. The apartment was survival. "Can we talk about this after the wedding?" I tried to keep my voice gentle. "After we're settled as husband and wife? It's not that I don't trust you, John. It's just It's a lot to process right before the wedding." He stared out the window for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then his shoulders relaxed, and he turned back with an apologetic smile. "You're right. I'm sorry. Bad timing." He crossed back to the couch, kissed my forehead. "I'm just excited about our future, about us being a real team." "We will be," I said, relief flooding through me. "Of course we will." He picked up another favor, started tying ribbon. The conversation ended. We finished the favors, he stayed the night, and in the morning, everything seemed normal again. The wedding itself was beautiful, simple and warm, and exactly what I'd wanted. Mrs. Chen sobbed throughout the entire ceremony. My coworkers clapped when we kissed. Laura gave a toast about how lucky I was to join their family, how John had always deserved someone who would appreciate him. When John slipped the ring on my finger, I felt hopeful, genuinely hopeful that I'd finally have what I dreamed of during those exhausted years working double shifts. A partner, a family, someone to build something with. But late that night, after the guests left and we returned to my apartment as husband and wife, I caught John looking around the living room with an expression I couldn't quite read. Satisfaction, maybe. Or assessment? John moved in the week after we returned from our weekend at a bed and breakfast 2 hours upstate, the modest honeymoon we could afford. He didn't have much. Clothes, some books, a laptop, a box of personal items. Everything fit in my apartment easily, almost like he barely existed in physical space before joining my carefully constructed life. The first week felt like playing house. We cooked dinner together, shared the bathroom mirror in the mornings, fell asleep watching movies on the couch. He seemed genuinely happy to be there, often commenting on small details I'd long stopped noticing. "You've made this place really comfortable," he'd say, or "I love coming home to this." Laura appeared on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after John moved in. I was still in my hospital cafeteria uniform, having just walked through the door after the morning shift, when I heard voices in the living room. John sat on the couch next to his sister, who'd apparently let herself in with the spare key I'd given John for emergencies. "Susan!" Laura stood, smiling brightly. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd surprise you both. I brought pastries." She gestured to a bakery box on my coffee table, already opened, crumbs on the surface I'd wiped down that morning. "That's sweet of you," I said, setting down my bag. "I didn't know you were coming." "Spur of the moment thing." She settled back onto the couch like she'd been there for hours. "I wanted to see how you two were settling in as newlyweds." She stayed for 3 hours. I changed out of my uniform, started preparing for my evening data entry shift, while Laura chatted with John about family members I didn't know, inside jokes I didn't understand. When I finally mentioned needing to get ready for work, Laura's eyebrows rose. "You're still working both jobs, even after getting married?" "The bills haven't changed," I said lightly. She glanced around the apartment with an expression I couldn't read. "Well, I suppose everyone has their priorities." She visited again that Friday, then Tuesday of the following week, then Thursday, each time unannounced, always with that same bright smile, always staying for hours. By the 4th visit, she'd started offering observations. "You keep your spices in the cabinet," she said, watching me cook dinner. "Most people use a rack. It's more organized." She opened my cabinet doors, without asking, rearranging jars while I stood at the stove. "The bathroom towels are mismatched," she mentioned another time, folding one I left on the rack. "You should invest in a proper set. It looks more pulled together." When she found dust on the bookshelf, inevitable given I worked 70 hours a week, she ran her finger along the wood and showed it to John. "You poor thing, living in bachelor conditions." She laughed like it was a joke, but her eyes stayed on me. John never said anything during these observations. He'd smile uncomfortably or change the subject, but he never told Laura to stop, never suggested her comments were inappropriate. The criticisms grew sharper. "Real wives make home-cooked meals every night. Laura said, watching me reheat leftovers after a double shift. John, did Mom ever serve you leftovers 2 days in a row? Not that I remember, he admitted. I'm sure Susan's doing her best, though I don't know how you can prioritize work over taking care of your husband. I looked at John, waiting for him to say something, that I worked hard, that we were fine, that his sister's opinion on our marriage was unnecessary. He stared at his plate. After Laura left that night, I confronted him. Your sister is criticizing me in my own home, I said, keeping my voice level. She doesn't mean anything by it. That's just how Laura is. She's trying to be helpful. Helpful would be asking if I need help. This is judgment. You're being too sensitive. He finally looked at me, and I saw irritation in his eyes. Laura is family. She cares about us. You could be more understanding instead of looking for problems. I'm not looking for problems, he interrupted. She's going through a hard time right now. Issues at work, stress with her ex. She needs support from family. I thought you'd be more compassionate. The argument ended with me apologizing, somehow, for being unreceptive to his sister's concern. Laura's visits increased to 3, sometimes 4 times a week. She'd rearrange my kitchen cabinets, comment on my work clothes, a little frumpy, don't you think? Suggest I should cut back hours to focus on homemaking. She'd run her hands over my furniture like she was appraising it, open my fridge and criticize its contents, use my bathroom and mention it could use better fixtures. John started echoing her observations. Maybe Laura has a point about the cooking, he'd say, or would it kill you to dust more often? One evening, I came home to find Laura had bought new throw pillows for my couch and replaced mine without asking. Surprise! The old ones were so drab, these brightened the whole room. My pillows, the ones I'd saved for and chosen carefully, sat in a garbage bag by the door. I looked at John. He smiled weakly. They do look nice, babe. Laura's got a good eye. I retrieved my pillows from the garbage after Laura left, but the message had been received. This wasn't my apartment anymore. It was becoming theirs.
John lost the logistics job 6 weeks after we married. He came home mid-afternoon on a Wednesday, his face tight with frustration, and told me they'd eliminated his position due to budget cuts. Just my luck, he said, dropping onto the couch. Finally get some stability, and it disappears. I sat beside him, rubbing his shoulder. You'll find something else. You did it before. Yeah. He didn't sound convinced. I'll start looking tomorrow. Tomorrow came and went, then the next day and the next. John would sit at the kitchen table with his laptop open, clicking through job boards while I got ready for my shifts. Sent out 5 applications today, he'd report when I came home. Then 10, then 15. The numbers grew, but the interviews didn't materialize. By the second week, he'd stopped getting dressed before noon. I'd leave for the hospital at 5:30 in the morning and return to find him in the same sweatpants, laptop closed, television playing. Rough day? I'd ask. The market's dead right now, he'd say. Everyone wants experience I don't have, or they're offering poverty wages. I'm not going to take just anything. Laura started visiting during the day. I'd come home from my morning shift and find them on the couch. Laura's purse on my coffee table, evidence of lunch they'd ordered scattered across the kitchen. We were just talking about John's options, Laura would say brightly, brainstorming opportunities. The opportunities never seemed to materialize into applications. 3 weeks after John lost his job, Laura called him while we were eating dinner. I watched his face shift as he listened, nodding, murmuring agreement. When he hung up, he set his phone down carefully. Laura's having car trouble, he said. Needs $400 for repairs. She gets paid next week, but the mechanic wants payment up front. I set down my fork. Doesn't she have a credit card? Maxed out. Medical bills from last month. He wasn't quite meeting my eyes. She asked if we could help, just until her paycheck comes through. $400.
Nearly half my hospital paycheck. Money I'd already allocated to the mortgage, utilities, groceries for the month. We're tight right now, I said carefully. With just my income. I know! John's jaw tightened. Believe me, I'm aware I'm not contributing. You don't have to remind me. That's not what I meant. She's family, Susan. She helped plan our wedding. She's been supportive of us. Now she needs help and you're worried about $400? The guilt was immediate and familiar. I was being selfish, petty. Laura had been kind in her way. Family helped family. I transferred the money that night. Laura paid me back 3 weeks later, exactly as promised. I felt ashamed for doubting her. 2 weeks after that, she needed $600 for her portion of her mother's medical bills. Mom's insurance didn't cover everything, John explained. Laura's trying to handle it, but she's stretched thin. I gave her the money. Then it was $800 for an unexpected tax bill, $300 because her apartment complex raised the rent and she was short until her commission check cleared, $500 for her car insurance premium, $200 for a family emergency John wouldn't specify. Each time, John would approach me with the same tight expression, the same explanation about Laura being in a bind, the same implication that refusing would make me heartless. Each time, I'd check my dwindling savings account and transfer money I couldn't afford to give. Laura always paid me back eventually, sometimes a week late, sometimes 3. But the pattern had established itself. My account would recover slightly, then another request would arrive, and I'd be depleted again. I started picking up extra data entry projects, working until 2 in the morning to make up the deficit. John would be asleep on the couch when I finished. The job search he'd mentioned that morning, apparently abandoned. "Did you apply anywhere today?" I asked one evening, too exhausted to be diplomatic. "I had 3 phone screens. They all went nowhere. You want me to take minimum wage jobs? Is that what you want?" "I want you to take something, anything. We can't keep..." "What can't? Helping my sister when she needs us? Funny how you have money for her when I ask, but suddenly we're broke when I'm the topic. That's not fair. What's not fair is you making me feel shit for being unemployed. You think I want this? You think I enjoy asking my wife for money to help my family?" I was too tired to fight. I apologized and went to bed. Laura's requests increased in frequency and size. $900, $1,000, $1,200 for a security deposit because she needed to move apartments suddenly. "She'll pay you back," John insisted each time. "She always does." But the payback period stretched longer. Money she borrowed in January wasn't returned until March. February's loan came back in May, minus $100 because she had unexpected expenses. My savings account, the cushion I'd built over years of sacrifice, was draining at a terrifying pace. I lay awake calculating how many more requests I could handle before I'd have nothing left. John spent his days on the couch, Laura spent my money, and I worked 70 hours a week to fund both of them.
Laura arrived on a Sunday morning without calling, letting herself in with the key John had given her weeks ago. I was still in my robe, having finally taken a rare day off, when I heard the door open and her heels clicking across my floor. "We need to talk," she announced, settling onto my couch like she was convening a board meeting. John emerged from the bedroom, already dressed, unsurprised by her presence. He'd known she was coming. I tightened the belt on my robe and sat in the chair across from them, exhaustion already settling into my bones, despite having just woken up. "I've been thinking about our arrangement," Laura began, crossing her legs. "The help you've been providing has been appreciated, but it's inconsistent, unpredictable. I can't budget around maybe getting help when emergencies arise." "I've given you money every time you've asked," I said carefully. "Exactly, when I ask, like I'm begging." Her voice sharpened. "That's not how family works, Susan. Family supports each other consistently, with dignity." I glanced at John. He was staring at his hands. "What I'm proposing is simple. $1,500 a month, regular support. I'll budget around it, you'll budget around it, and we won't have these awkward conversations every time something comes up." The number hit me like cold water. $1,500 every month? Nearly my entire hospital paycheck. "That's not possible," I said. "That's more than half my income." "You have 2 jobs. And you own this apartment outright, so your housing costs are just maintenance fees and utilities. You can afford it." "Laura, I can't give you $1,500 every month. That would leave me almost nothing." "Nothing? You'd still have your data entry income. That's more than some people live on." She leaned forward. "I'm not asking for charity, Susan. I'm asking for what family provides. John's family has always taken care of each other." "When you were working," I said, unable to stop myself, "before John moved in, how exactly were you taking care of him?" Her eyes went cold. "I gave him a place to stay when he needed it. I fed him. I helped him emotionally and professionally. Support isn't always about money." "But now it is?" "Now he has a wife who's supposed to support him, and by extension, support his family. That's what marriage means." I looked at John again, waiting for him to say something, to acknowledge how insane this demand was. He cleared his throat. "Maybe not 1,500, but something regular would help Laura plan better. She's struggling, Susan." "We're all struggling. You haven't worked in 3 months." "And whose fault is that?" Laura's voice cut through. "The market is terrible. John is trying, but you seem more concerned about hoarding money than helping the man you married." The apartment suddenly felt smaller, airless. "I'll give you $500 a month," I heard myself say. "That's what I can manage." Laura's expression didn't change. $1,500. "I don't have $1,500 to give every month." "Then you need to reconsider your priorities." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Also, we should discuss the apartment." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "John lives here now. He's your husband. The apartment should reflect that legally. Family ownership, not just your name on the deed." She said it casually, like suggesting we repaint a wall. "It's only fair." "The apartment is my premarital property. Property that your husband lives in and contributes to." "He doesn't contribute," I said, my voice rising. "He hasn't paid a single bill since he moved in." "Because you won't let him," Laura snapped. "You hold everything so tight, control everything. Maybe if John felt like he had actual equity in this relationship, he'd be more motivated." John still said nothing. $500 a month, I repeated, my hands shaking. "That's my offer. The apartment stays in my name." Laura stared at me for a long moment, then smiled thinly. "We'll start with $500, for now." She took the first payment before she left, and I transferred it while she watched, her phone dinging with the confirmation. After that day, something shifted. Laura's visits became invasions. She'd arrive and immediately start rearranging, moving my lamps, shifting furniture, replacing kitchen items with versions she'd bought without asking. "This layout is better," she'd say, shoving my couch against a different wall, "more open." She'd go through my closet and comment on my clothes, open my mail and ask about bills, use my laptop without permission, cook in my kitchen and leave the mess for me to clean up. "Laura, please don't move my things," I said once, watching her relocate my bookshelf. "I'm helping you create a better space. You should be grateful." John would watch these scenes unfold from the couch, silent, complicit. My apartment, the fortress I'd built with years of sacrifice, was being occupied by invaders I'd foolishly let through the door. And I was paying them for the privilege.
I found the documents on a Thursday evening, tucked inside a folder on the kitchen table, beneath some junk mail. I'd been sorting through the pile after my morning shift when I noticed the letterhead, a law firm I didn't recognize, and my name misspelled as Susam Walker. My hands went cold as I pulled out the papers. Quitclaim deed. The words jumped out at me from the legal text. my apartment address, a form attempting to transfer partial ownership from me to John Michael Henderson, and at the bottom in the signature field, a version of my name that looked almost right but wasn't. The S looped differently than I wrote it. The final N in Susan tilted at the wrong angle. Someone had practiced my signature, had tried to forge it. I stood in my kitchen holding evidence that my husband had attempted to steal my home. John was in the bedroom, napping. He'd been napping a lot lately, sleeping until noon, then again in the afternoon claiming job hunting exhausted him. I walked to the bedroom door and opened it without knocking. "What is this?" I held up the papers. He blinked awake slowly, squinting at the documents. "What's what?" "These legal forms, trying to add your name to my apartment deed with a forged signature." He sat up, running his hand through his hair. For a moment he looked genuinely confused, then recognition flickered across his face. "Oh, that." "Oh, that?" My voice was shaking. "You tried to forge my signature on property documents." "I didn't forge anything." He swung his legs out of bed, defensive now. I was looking into what it would take. The paperwork involved. That's a draft." "A draft with a fake version of my signature at the bottom?" "I was practicing how it would look." "You were practicing forging my name, John. That's fraud. That's illegal." He stood, his face flushing. "You're being dramatic. I wasn't actually going to file anything. I was exploring options because you refused to have a real conversation about this." "We've had the conversation multiple times. The answer is no." "The answer is always no with you. No to helping Laura properly. No to making me feel like an equal partner. No to treating this marriage like an actual partnership." "Partnership doesn't mean signing over my apartment." "It's not just your apartment anymore. I live here. We're married. But you act like I'm some tenant you're letting crash here out of pity. Do you know how that feels, living in a place where everything belongs to your wife and you own nothing? You knew I owned this apartment before we got married. I thought you'd act like a wife after we got married. I thought things would change, but you're the same controlling, paranoid." He caught himself, breathing hard. "Laura put you up to this," I said quietly. "Didn't she?" His silence was confirmation. "She's been pressuring you to get your name on the deed. That's what all the comments about family ownership have been about. She wants access to my apartment. She wants me to have security. She wants me to be treated like a husband, not a charity case. And maybe she's right. Maybe if you actually trusted me, actually treated me like a partner instead of someone you have to protect your precious assets from." "Get out," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Get out of this room. I need to think." "This is my room too." "Get out." He left, slamming the door behind him. I heard him in the living room, the television clicking on, volume loud. I sat on the bed, holding the forged documents, and realized with crystal clarity that my marriage was over. Not damaged, not troubled, over. The man I'd married had tried to steal my home. I pulled out my phone and searched for family law attorneys. I found a firm with good reviews and called, leaving a message requesting a consultation. Then I opened my banking app and changed all my passwords, adding two-factor authentication to everything. I photographed the forged documents from multiple angles, saved the images to my cloud storage, and emailed them to myself at 3 different addresses. Over the next week, I moved through my life like I was preparing for war. I met with the attorney, a sharp-eyed professional named Jerry, who listened to my story without judgment and gave me clear instructions. She said, document everything. Conversations, financial transactions, any threats or coercion. Get a recording app on your phone. Don't let him know you're preparing. I bought a small recording device that looked like a pen. I started recording every conversation with John and Laura, the device sitting innocuously in my shirt pocket or on the table between us. I photographed Laura's rearrangements of my apartment, the evidence of her constant invasions. I screenshotted every Venmo and bank transfer showing the money I'd given her. I documented John's unemployment, his daily schedule of sleeping and television, the job applications he claimed to submit but couldn't show me. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and began redirecting my paychecks there, leaving only enough in our joint account to cover bills and avoid suspicion. I made copies of every important document, my deed, my birth certificate, my tax returns, and stored them at Mrs. Chen's house. John noticed nothing. He was too busy sleeping and waiting for me to fund his sister's lifestyle. Laura noticed nothing. She was too busy treating my apartment like her personal staging ground. They thought I was defeated, compliant, too tired and too conflict-averse to fight back. They had no idea I was building a case that would destroy them both.
Laura called on a Tuesday to announce she was organizing a family dinner at my apartment that Saturday. Not asking, announcing. "Just a casual thing," she said, her voice bright with false warmth. "John's aunt and uncle are in town, and a few cousins want to meet you properly. I thought it would be nice to host something at your place, since it's so spacious." My apartment was barely 900 square feet, but I didn't argue. I knew what this was. "How many people?" I asked. "Oh, just 8 or 10. I'll bring the main dishes. You don't have to do anything except show up and be gracious." I agreed because refusing would only delay the inevitable. They were escalating, and I needed to see how far they planned to go. My recording pen sat charged and ready in my purse. Saturday arrived with unseasonable heat. I came home from my morning shift to find Laura already in my apartment, rearranging furniture to accommodate extra seating she'd brought without asking. John helped remove my coffee table, both of them too focused to acknowledge me standing in my own doorway. "Oh, good you're here," Laura said, barely glancing up. "Can you put these chairs in the bedroom for now? We need the space." I moved the chairs and changed out of my work uniform, listening to more relatives arrive. Voices filled my living room. John's Aunt Helen, Uncle Mo, 2 cousins I'd met briefly at the wedding, and 3 people I'd never seen before. Laura had set out a spread on my kitchen counter that looked expensive, catered. She stood at the center of the room like a hostess, directing people to seats, pouring wine into glasses she'd brought because mine apparently weren't nice enough. "Everyone, you remember Susan, John's wife." The way she said wife carried a faint edge of sarcasm. We ate. I answered polite questions about my work, my background, how I'd met John. The conversation felt normal enough until dessert was served and Laura stood, tapping her wine glass like she was making a toast. "I'm so glad we could all get together," she began, smiling around the room. "Family is so important, especially now when John and Susan are building their life together." She paused, her smile thinning. "Which is actually why I wanted us all here. There's a situation we need to discuss as a family." My hands stilled on my fork. "Susan owns this apartment," Laura continued. "She bought it before she met John, which is wonderful, very independent. But now she's married, and marriage means partnership, sharing. Yet John's name isn't on the deed. He has no legal claim to the home he lives in." Aunt Helen frowned. "Really? That seems unusual." "It is unusual," Laura agreed. "Especially when Susan refuses to even discuss adding John's name. She insists on keeping everything in her name only, like John is some stranger who might disappear. That's not fair," I started, but Laura spoke over me. "And financially, she's been very selective in supporting family. I've needed help several times, and while Susan has contributed, it's always begrudging, always with this attitude of inconvenience, like family is a burden instead of a blessing." "Laura, I've given you thousands of dollars," I said, my voice level. "Loaned," she corrected, "with this energy of resentment, and never consistently. I've asked Susan to commit to regular support, $1,500 a month, so I can actually budget and plan. She refused." Uncle Mo shifted uncomfortably. $1,500 is quite a lot." "Is it?" Laura's eyes flashed.
For someone who owns property and works 2 jobs? Someone who has no children, no major expenses, while her husband can't find work and his sister struggles to make ends meet? One of the cousins spoke up. Maybe Susan has her own financial obligations. Like what? Laura interrupted. The apartment is paid off. She has no car payment, no debt that we know of. She just wants to hoard everything for herself. John had been silent throughout, sitting beside his aunt. Now he cleared his throat and all eyes turned to him. Susan is very focused on security, he said quietly. I understand that. Her past was difficult. But she takes it too far. She won't share anything real with me, won't add my name to the apartment, won't commit to helping my family consistently. I feel like a guest in my own home, like I'm married to someone who doesn't actually trust me. That's because you tried to forge my signature, I said. The room went silent. That's not what happened, John said quickly. I was looking into the paperwork. You practiced forging my signature on quit-claim deed documents. Aunt Helen's eyes widened. John, is that true? It was a misunderstanding, Laura cut in smoothly. John was trying to understand the legal process because Susan refuses to discuss it like an adult. She's made him so desperate to feel like an equal that he resorted to researching options independently. By forging documents, I repeated. This is exactly what I'm talking about, John said, his voice rising. Everything is an accusation with you. Everything is suspicion. You're cold. You're heartless. You care more about your property than your husband. I care about not being defrauded. Laura slammed her hand on the table. Enough. Here's what's going to happen. Susan, you're going to add John's name to this apartment. Equal ownership. And you're going to commit to $1,500 monthly for family support. That's what wives do. That's what family does. I looked around the room. Most faces showed discomfort, uncertainty, but no one was defending me. No one was telling Laura she was insane. No, I said clearly. No, Laura's voice went dangerously quiet. This is my premarital property. Legally, it remains mine. I won't be adding anyone's name to the deed, and I won't be committing to payments I can't afford. You selfish bitch, Laura hissed. I think everyone should leave, I said, standing. We're not done. Yes, we are. This is my home. You're not entitled to it. None of you are. Please leave. John stood, his face flushed with rage. This is why we're here, Susan, because you care more about control than family. Then maybe you should find a family who wants to steal from you, and see how that works out. I watched them gather their things in furious silence, Laura's face twisted with hatred, John refusing to meet my eyes. Afterwards, I sat alone in my ransacked apartment and uploaded the entire recorded conversation to my cloud storage. Let them come, I thought. I was ready.
The hostility after the family tribunal was immediate and suffocating. John stopped speaking to me in complete sentences, communicating only in grunts and glares. He'd leave rooms when I entered, turn up the television when I tried to top, slam doors hard enough to rattle the frames. Laura called constantly. John would answer on speakerphone, making no effort to hide the conversations happening in my own living room. She's going to learn, I heard Laura say one afternoon while I was in the kitchen. She thinks she has all the power, but we'll show her what happens when you disrespect family. John murmured agreement, and neither of them acknowledged me standing 10 feet away. The appraiser arrived on a Monday morning without warning. I'd taken a rare sick day, exhausted from back-to-back doubles, and was sleeping when the doorbell rang. I stumbled to the door in my robe to find John letting in a middle-aged man carrying a clipboard and a camera. "What's going on?" I asked. "Property appraisal," the man said pleasantly. "Shouldn't take more than an hour." I didn't request an appraisal. "I did," John said flatly. "We need to know the current market value." "For what purpose?" "For legal purposes." He turned to the appraiser. "You can start in the living room." "Stop," I said. "You don't have my permission to appraise this apartment." The appraiser looked between us uncertainly. "Is there a problem? I was told both owners requested." "There's only one owner, me, and I'm asking you to leave." John's face went red. "This is my home too." "Not legally. Please leave," I said to the appraiser. He left quickly, mumbling apologies. After the door closed,
John turned on me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undisguised hatred. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "Is that a threat?" He didn't answer, just grabbed his jacket and left, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I called Jerry immediately. "He's escalating," I told her. "Document everything and be careful, Susan. Desperate people do desperate things." 2 days later, I received notice that John had filed paperwork with the court claiming marital property rights to my apartment. The petition argued that because he'd lived there for months and it served as the marital home, he was entitled to partial ownership regardless of whose name was on the deed. Jerry reviewed the documents and snorted. "He has no case. The apartment is clearly premarital property, but he's going to make this ugly and expensive." "How expensive?" "Could be thousands in legal fees if he drags it out. He's probably hoping you'll settle just to avoid the cost and stress." I thought of my savings account, already depleted from months of supporting Laura and John. The idea of spending thousands more to fight for what was legally mine made me want to scream. But I'd come too far to surrender now. Laura called that evening. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "We need to talk," she said, her voice falsely calm. "This situation has gotten out of hand. I think if we all sit down together, adults in the same room, we can resolve this peacefully." "There's nothing to resolve. The apartment is mine." "Susan, please, for John's sake. He's falling apart. He feels humiliated, attacked, like his own wife is treating him like an enemy." Her voice softened, taking on a concerned tone. "I know you two love each other. I know this isn't what you wanted for your marriage. Let's just talk. One more family gathering. Clear the air. Find a compromise everyone can live with." I should have said no. Should have hung up and let Jerry handle everything through the courts. But some part of me, the part that still remembered the man who'd brought me cheap flowers and sat with me during work breaks, wanted to try one last time. Wanted to look John in the eye and see if there was anything left of the person I'd married. "Fine," I said. "One meeting. Just immediate family. And it happens at a neutral location, not my apartment." "Your apartment is fine," Laura said quickly. "John lives there. He should feel comfortable in his own home." "Neutral location or no meeting." She paused, then sighed. "Fine, I'll arrange something. This Saturday, 7 p.m. I'll text you the address." After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. I spent the week preparing. I told Jerry about the meeting, and she advised against going, but didn't forbid it. "If you do go, record everything. Don't sign anything. Don't make any promises. And if things get heated, leave immediately." I fully charged my recording pen and my phone. I wore clothes with pockets to keep both devices secure. I told Mrs. Chen where I'd be and asked her to call me at 9 p.m. to check in. I withdrew enough cash to disappear for a few days if necessary, storing it in my car's glove compartment. I reviewed all the evidence I'd collected: recordings, photographs, financial records, the forged documents. I backed up everything to multiple cloud services and emailed copies to Jerry. Friday night, I barely slept. I lay in bed listening to John snore on the couch — he'd stopped sleeping in our bedroom weeks ago — and thought about how completely my life had unraveled in less than a year. Saturday morning, John left early without saying where he was going. I was almost relieved to have the apartment to myself. I showered, dressed carefully in jeans and a simple shirt, nothing that could be grabbed or torn. I put my hair in a tight ponytail. I double-checked that both recording devices were working. At 6:30, Laura texted the address. My apartment. Of course. I stared at the message, anger and resignation washing over me in equal measure.
They'd never intended to meet anywhere else. This had always been about invading my space, asserting their claim to my home. I could refuse to go, could leave, spend the evening anywhere else, and let them sit in my apartment and rage at my absence. But something in me needed to see this through, needed to face them one final time and let them know exactly who they were dealing with. I checked my recording devices one more time, and then I waited for whatever came next.
The EMTs arrived first, 2 professionals in dark blue uniforms who moved through my apartment with clinical efficiency. One knelt beside me while the other assessed the scene with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The candle holder on the floor, John backed against the wall, Laura standing frozen by the kitchen. "Can you tell me what happened?" the EMT asked, shining a light in my eyes. "My husband struck me with that glass candle holder," I said clearly. "I was standing, he swung at my head, I fell and hit the floor." She nodded, examining the wound. "You'll need stitches, possible concussion. We should transport you." "After I speak to police," I said. "I need to give my statement while witnesses are still here." She exchanged a glance with her partner, but didn't argue. They cleaned and bandaged the wound, checked my pupils, took my blood pressure. I answered their questions calmly while my phone continued recording everything. The police arrived as the EMTs were finishing. 2 officers, one older with gray at his temples, one younger with a notebook already out. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened?" I told them, clearly, chronologically, without emotion. The family gathering, the demands that I sign over my property, my refusal, John's escalating anger, the assault. I gestured to the candle holder, still lying where it had fallen. "These people witnessed it," I said, indicating Aunt Helen and Uncle Mo, who looked like they wanted to disappear into the furniture. "They can corroborate my statement." The older officer turned to them. "Is that accurate?" Uncle Mo nodded miserably. Aunt Helen whispered, "Yes." "He barely touched her," Laura burst out. "She's exaggerating." "Ma'am, please step back," the younger officer said firmly. I pulled out my phone. I have photographs of my injuries taken immediately after the assault. I have a recording of this entire gathering, including the assault and everything that led to it, and I have months of documented evidence showing the financial coercion and fraud that preceded tonight's violence. The older officer's eyebrows rose. "You recorded this?" "I've been recording all interactions with my husband and his family for 3 weeks. I discovered he attempted to forge my signature on property documents and consulted an attorney. I've been documenting everything since then." I showed him the photos on my phone, my bloodied face, from multiple angles, John standing over me, the weapon, the witnesses' shocked expressions. "I also need to call my attorney. Is that permitted?" "Yes, ma'am." I dialed Jerry. She answered on the second ring, and I explained the situation in 3 sentences. "Don't say anything else without me present," she said immediately. "I'm on my way. 20 minutes." While we waited, the officers separated everyone. John was placed in the hallway, handcuffed, his face ashen. Laura hovered near him, whispering urgently, until the younger officer moved her away. Aunt Helen and Uncle Mo gave their statements in monotone voices, confirming what they'd witnessed. Jerry arrived in 15 minutes, sharp-eyed and carrying a briefcase. She conferred briefly with the officers, then with me. "Show them everything," she said. I did. The forged quitclaim deed documents, screenshots of every financial transaction with Laura, recordings of conversations where John and Laura discussed taking the apartment, text messages, emails, the legal paperwork John had filed claiming marital property rights. The older officer reviewed it all with increasing gravity. "This is extensive documentation." "I'm thorough," I said. "We're arresting your husband for assault. Given the evidence of ongoing coercion and fraud,
I'm also recommending you file an emergency restraining order." "How do I do that?" Jerry pulled papers from her briefcase. "Already prepared. We can file tonight." The process took hours. Statements were taken and retaken. Evidence was cataloged. Jerry walked me through the restraining order application, and we filed it electronically from my phone, while EMTs waited to transport me. John was led out in handcuffs, his eyes finally meeting mine as he passed. I saw rage there, and disbelief, and something that might have been fear. I felt nothing. Laura tried to follow him, but the younger officer stopped her. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises. The restraining order will likely include you as well." "This is insane! You've destroyed him! Over what? Money? Property? You're a monster!" "I'm someone who protects what's mine," I said. "You should have remembered that." By midnight, I had a temporary restraining order valid for both John and Laura. By 1 a.m., I was in the emergency room getting 8 stitches. By 3 a.m., I was back home with Jerry, changing the locks on my door while she walked through next steps. "Divorce?" I asked. "Immediately. With this evidence, it'll be straightforward." I looked around my apartment, my fortress, my proof of survival. It had been invaded, violated, turned into a battlefield. But it was still mine. "Let's destroy them," I said quietly. Jerry smiled, already drafting the papers.
I didn't sleep that night. After Jerry left at 4 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and executed the plan I'd been mentally rehearsing for weeks. First, the money. I logged into every joint account, checking, savings, the credit card I'd foolishly added John to 3 months ago. I transferred every accessible dollar to my new private account at the other bank. $4,200 total, most of it money I'd deposited myself. I left exactly $10 in the joint checking to keep it open for legal documentation purposes. Then I canceled my card on the joint credit account and requested a new one for my private accounts. Changed every PIN, every password, every security question. Enabled alerts for any attempted access. By 5 a.m., John had no access to any of my money. Next, I emailed my supervisors at both jobs, short, professional messages explaining I'd experienced a domestic violence incident and had obtained a restraining order against my estranged husband. I attached a photo of the order and requested they alert security that John Henderson was not permitted on the premises or to contact me through work channels. Both supervisors responded within hours, one with concern and offers of support, the other with clinical efficiency, confirming security had been notified. At 7 a.m., the locksmith arrived. I'd called an emergency service that worked weekends, paying extra for immediate response. He changed every lock on my apartment, the main door, the deadbolt, even the window locks, and installed a chain guard and peephole camera I could monitor from my phone. "Had trouble?" he asked, noting the police tape still across my doorway from evidence collection. "Getting rid of it," I said. He handed me 3 copies of the new keys. I kept one, gave one to Mrs. Chen, and locked the third in my fireproof safe. By 9 a.m., my apartment was a fortress again. Jerry arrived at 10 with a stack of documents and 2 coffees. We sat at my kitchen table, the one I'd refinished years ago, and began the methodical work of destroying my husband's life. "Divorce petition," she said, sliding papers across to me. "Grounds, domestic violence, fraud, financial abuse. We're requesting full custody of all premarital assets, complete separation of any claimed marital property, and full protection under the restraining order." I signed everywhere she indicated. "Now, the evidence package." She opened her laptop. "I need you to send me everything. Every recording, every photo, every financial document, every text message, organized by date if possible." I'd already prepared it. I forwarded her 3 emails containing months of documentation, neatly categorized. Financial coercion, property fraud, domestic abuse, witness statements. She reviewed it with growing satisfaction. "This is extraordinary. Most domestic violence cases struggle with evidence.
You've built a prosecutorial-level case. I worked hard for what I had. I wasn't going to let them take it without a fight. We spent 4 hours compiling the divorce filing. Every forged signature, every financial demand, every recording of Laura and John discussing how to get the apartment, every witness statement from the assault, the photos of my injuries, the police report, the restraining order, the attempted property claim John had filed. His attorney will try to claim marital property rights. They'll argue he's entitled to appreciation in the apartment's value during the marriage, or compensation for contributing to the household. He contributed nothing. I have bank statements proving I paid every bill. I know, that's why we'll win. She closed her laptop. This file's Monday morning. He'll be served by Tuesday. The temporary restraining order needs a hearing for permanent status. That's scheduled for next week. I'll push for an expedited divorce given the violence and fraud. How long total? With this evidence, 3 to 6 months. Maybe less if he doesn't contest, which his attorney will likely advise once they see what we have. After Jerry left, I walked through my apartment room by room. The living room where Laura had rearranged my furniture, the kitchen where she'd criticized my cooking, the bedroom where John had slept beside me and plotted to steal my home. I opened windows, letting cold air sweep through and clear out the stale energy of invasion. Then I took every item John had brought into my apartment, his clothes, his books, his laptop, his toiletries, and packed them in garbage bags. I stacked them by the door. Tomorrow I'd have them delivered to Laura's address with a note. He's your problem now. My phone buzzed. A restricted number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, then again. Voicemail notifications piled up. I blocked the number without listening. Laura tried calling from her phone. Blocked. Aunt Helen sent a text. Please reconsider. Family can work through this. I deleted it and blocked her too. By Sunday evening, I'd blocked 14 numbers. By Monday, 23. Tuesday afternoon, Jerry called. He's been served. His attorney already contacted me asking about settlement. No settlement, I said. I want this on record. I want a judgment. That's what I told them. I sat in my apartment that evening, truly mine again, locks changed, invaders expelled, and felt something unfamiliar settle over me. Not happiness, exactly, not yet, but the quiet, steel-hard certainty that I would never let anyone take what was mine again. The war wasn't over, but I'd already won.
The permanent restraining order hearing happened first, 1 week after the assault. John appeared via video with a public defender, looking haggard and diminished on the screen. The judge reviewed the evidence, photos, recordings, witness statements, the forged documents, for less than 15 minutes. This is one of the clearest cases of domestic violence and financial abuse I've reviewed, the judge said. Restraining order granted for 3 years. No contact, direct or indirect. Minimum distance of 500 feet at all times. John's face on the screen went gray. Laura, sitting beside him in whatever room they'd connected from, looked like she wanted to reach through the camera and strangle me. I felt nothing but relief. The divorce moved faster than Jerry had predicted. John's public defender reviewed the evidence package and advised him not to contest anything. "You have no case," I heard Jerry tell me later he'd been told. "The apartment is clearly premarital property. The financial records show you contributed nothing. The assault is documented. If you fight this, you'll lose and accumulate legal debt you can't pay." John signed the settlement agreement 6 weeks after being served. The final hearing was scheduled for late April, 3 months after the night he'd struck me. I wore a simple navy dress and sat beside Jerry in the courtroom, my evidence binder on the table in front of us, though we both knew we wouldn't need it. John sat across the aisle with his public defender, thinner than I remembered, wearing a suit that looked borrowed. He didn't look at me once. The judge reviewed the settlement terms aloud. The apartment remained my sole property with no claim from John to any appreciation in value. All premarital assets remained mine. John waived any right to spousal support. The restraining order remained in effect. Division of debt? None, as we'd accumulated no joint debt. John was responsible for his own legal fees. "Mr. Henderson, do you understand these terms?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," John said quietly. "And you agree to them voluntarily?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Miss Walker, do you agree to these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. The gavel came down. Marriage dissolved. Parties are advised the restraining order remains in full effect. It was over in 12 minutes. I walked out of the courthouse into spring sunshine, Jerry beside me with her briefcase. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said. I heard about John and Laura through Mrs. Chen, who heard from a cousin who knew someone in their family. John had moved into Laura's apartment after his arrest. Within 2 months, they were at each other's throats. Laura blamed John for being weak, for losing control, for ruining their carefully laid plans. John blamed Laura for pushing him, for her greed, for getting him into the situation in the first place. The small apartment they shared became a pressure cooker of resentment and mutual recrimination. Laura's job performance suffered. She lost a major account, her income dropped, and suddenly she was the one struggling to make rent without the monthly payments she'd been extracting from me. John couldn't find work. The assault conviction showed up on every background check. The few interviews he managed to get ended when employers searched his name and found the court records. They destroyed each other slowly, trapped together by circumstances and their own failures. I didn't gloat. I simply stopped thinking about them. My life rebuilt itself piece by piece, the way I'd furnished my apartment years ago, deliberately, with care. I kept both jobs for another year, then finally quit the data entry work when I received a promotion at the hospital. The extra sleep felt like luxury. I took the certification course I'd put off and earned a credential that came with a raise. I repainted the apartment, choosing colors I loved without anyone's input. I replaced the couch where John had spent his unemployed days. I bought new dishes to replace the ones Laura had criticized. I made the space mine again, erasing their presence room by room. Mrs. Chen introduced me to her book club. I met women who worked hard, supported themselves, understood the value of independence. We became friends, real friends, built on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. I started dating again eventually, but carefully. I'd learned to recognize the red flags I'd ignored with John, the too quick attachment, the subtle entitlement, the man who saw my stability as something to access rather than respect. I learned to walk away at the first sign of trouble. I learned that being alone was infinitely better than being used. On the 1-year anniversary of my divorce, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and looked around at everything I'd protected and reclaimed. The apartment I'd saved for, the life I'd built, the peace I'd fought for. My phone sat silent on the table. No demands, no manipulation, no invasions. The space was quiet, clean, mine. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, bleeding on this floor, looking up at a man who tried to steal everything from me. I thought about the cold clarity that had come over me in that moment, the certainty that I would survive this and come out stronger. I had survived. I was stronger. And I would never, ever let anyone make me feel small in my own home again. I raised my tea in a silent toast to the woman I'd become, the fortress I'd defended, and the life I'd reclaimed. Then I opened my book and settled into my evenings surrounded by peace I'd earned and freedom no one could take away.